Our panel is ready. Emil Akesson is with us, founding partner, chairman, CLC and Partners, and James Butterfill is with us, head of research at CoinShares. Thank you both for being with us. So, Emil, we got what was long awaited, which was the approval, and I think a lot of folks thought the market may jump. But now when we look at Bitcoin and it's back to this 43,000 level, I mean, is this the intrinsic value? Where is it headed? Because you can't use catalysts like an ETF to really say this is going to be my investment, right? I mean, what's the value of Bitcoin? How does anybody begin to try and surmise that?
Well, it's really down to how Bitcoin is being used as well, and the attractiveness of it. So the ETF obviously has been the name of the game over the past 6 months, and there's been a lot of hype in the industry leading up to it. But since we've seen this rebound as well, what that's really down to is because you've got the grayscale Bitcoin essentially being offloaded, putting pressure down on the price, reducing it down to where we are today. Looking at moving forward, though, we have the halving of Bitcoin coming up within a couple of months, and we have these ETFs, meaning that there's a lot of capital inflow into the Bitcoin market right now. So all these factors combined with the overall utility of Bitcoin as a international currency within some industries, it's really what's going to push it up in a lot of analysts' view.
Right, understood. James, what do you think? Where do we stand on all of this? I mean, what makes Bitcoin a good investment or not? I mean, now it's eligible even for retirement portfolios.
Yeah, so I mean, the ETF market is hugely prone to hype, and we do suspect some of the seeders of the funds were perhaps buying Bitcoin prior to the event, and so with Grayscale selling out, I think on net there was probably net selling, and that pushed the price down essentially. But that doesn't detract from the fact there's roughly $14 trillion of assets that first have access to Bitcoin that can buy for the first time since this launch. It's very hard to tell just how much will flow in, but speaking to investors for many years now, and very recently I was in Europe, and one of the key reasons why investors are thinking and why there is some value in this. I mean, this term intrinsic value is abused a lot, but I would argue that many investors see it as a diversification tool and as a flight to quality. Just take the banking crisis in March last year. Many of our investors were buying Bitcoin at that point because they were so concerned about the US banking sector. Fast forward to this year, we have rate cuts most likely. The US could fall into recession. It's not yet answered whether the Fed have made a policy error yet. And many clients want a hedge against a policy error, and Bitcoin fits well into that kind of alternative investment category.
Yeah. What's interesting is with these ETFs, spot Bitcoin ETFs, as I mentioned, now it's eligible for retirement portfolios. Analysts at Standard Chartered anticipate inflows with a range of 50 billion to 100 billion in 2024. So could this be opening the floodgates for huge wealth that could come from this, or at least be invested in this area, Emil? And does it concern you, or is it a good idea?
It doesn't necessarily concern me at all, and it probably will be a generator of massive wealth, as it has in the past as well. What's I wouldn't say necessarily unique, but what is rare, at least with Bitcoin and the crypto industry, is that it is a value holder as opposed to many other cryptocurrencies. To take Ethereum, for example, there's a lot of utility in Ethereum and the Ethereum network, where Bitcoin is essentially a way of transacting wealth back and forth. So with all this value being pumped into the sector, obviously there will be a push from below. There's resistance right now at about 48K. And most likely that resistance will be breached in mid 2024, if not sooner. If you take a look at what is actually going down on street level, there is very little doubt amongst crypto savvy investors that this will happen. And as we're moving into the bigger players like BlackRock, for example, now having an opportunity to invest into Bitcoin and creating these ETFs, so the common investor can also go into it. Obviously, that would be something that would be really quite interesting to see how it develops. But the general consensus seems to be that it will be positive for Bitcoin overall.
Yeah. And look, you have other ways of doing this. You don't have to just get Bitcoin or a Bitcoin ETF or BitO or whatever. There's so many ways to be in crypto. James, at CoinShares, what do they talk about, and what are some of the leading ways that you see working for the years going forward investing in crypto?
It's becoming increasingly evident. I mean, the ETF launch is really, in my view, a bit of a sideshow. It does democratize Bitcoin for many new investors, which is great, but I don't think it just in a kind of inclusion or an access thing makes fundamentally much change to the markets. But it's becoming very clear that Bitcoin is an emerging store of value, and it's competing with other stores of values like US treasuries. So if interest rates are rising like they have done in recent years, treasuries look more attractive, and that has negatively affected Bitcoin. But it became evident last year that actually interest rates were on the potentially on a downwards trajectory, or at least tapering. And as a consequence, Bitcoin's performed well. And I think this year, Bitcoin will continue to perform well because of falling interest rates. And look, don't forget, if you look at intraday prices and price sensitive or macro sensitive data such as CPI, you can see when there's a high CPI release, Bitcoin reacts negatively and vice versa.
Right. Just quickly, Emil, do you think we could see Bitcoin 100,000?
We will most likely see Bitcoin at 100,000. The big question is, when will that happen? I personally, looking at the numbers right now, don't see that happening in 2024. But moving forward, yes, absolutely. And looking at long-term prediction for 2020, 2030, 2035, etc., we're probably looking far beyond that. So, I mean, keep in mind, there is a very limited supply of Bitcoin. You have the halving coming up, meaning that the supply for miners of Bitcoin will go down. And then you have, of course, ETFs and everything else going on with Bitcoin being a value storage, that will only put more buy pressure on it. So as that continues to progress over the coming years and coming decades, the value will only go up. There will be a lot of ups and downs, absolutely.
Okay.
It's a volatile asset. We can't put that aside. But overall, the trajectory is up and up down.
Okay. Emil Akesson, James Butterfill, thank you both.